Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members, and welcome to this planning and licensing, in this case, licensing part of the committee. Again, if you would be sure when you're speaking, you've got your microphones switched on, and again, members of the public, if you're here for one item, you're very free to leave at the end of that one. Before I go into the agenda proper, if I could come round the table and people could introduce themselves and say in what capacity they are here. So I'm Edward Baines, I chair this committee.
I'm David Ebbett, I'm a governance officer for Rutland.
I'm Darren Dolby, I'm a council officer for licensing.
I'm Savannah Parkinson, I'm a licensing officer for Rutland and Peterborough Council.
I'm Will Kirstein, General Manager at Rutland Water, representing Anglian Water.
I'm Sally Benton, Catering Operations Manager at Rutland Water, and I made the application for the alcohol.
I'm Gail Waller, and I'm one of the two county councillors for Normanton Ward, and this application falls within Normanton Ward.
Yes, good evening. It's Kenneth Vaughan, equally so. I'm the councillor for the Normanton Ward and I'm representing the residents. Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Griffin, an interested party.
I'm Lelia Griffin and I'm an interested party in this kiosk and water application.
I'm Christopher Renner, Normanton Parish Meeting Chair.
I'm William Cross, I'm a councillor and I'm sitting on the Planning and Licensing Committee.
I'm Jeff Dale and likewise I'm sitting on the Planning and Licensing Committee.
Gordon Brown, member of the Planning and Licensing Committee.
Abigail McCartney, also a member of the Planning and Licensing Committee.
Paul Brown, councillor and vice chair of the Planning Committee.
I'm Sarah Khwaja, solicitor, legal advisor to the committee.
Fine, thank you very much indeed. And we'll now move to the agenda as printed. So do we have any apologies, please?
Apologies tonight, Chair, have been received from Councillor Andrew Brown, Nick Beggy, Councillor Raymond Payne, David Blanksby and Rick Wilson for this evening.
Thank you. Item 2, any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. Petitions, deputations and questions. We haven't any specific ones, and so we now move to the main point, which is the application of the kiosk near Normanton Church. So if we could have the report there. Thank you.
Darren, are you okay to bring the report forward?
Good evening. Members of the committee have before them an application for a new premises licence which has been submitted by Anglian Water Services Limited relating to a premises situated at the kiosk near to Normanton Church at Rutland Water. Representations have been received from 2 local councillors and 5 local residents in their capacity as other persons. There are no representations from any of the responsible authorities, nor any representations in support of the application. Taking into account that all parties have had the opportunity to read the report, it is not my intention to go through the report in fine detail, but to draw attention to the significant areas of the application. Paragraph 3 deals with the authorisations and hours applied for. After consultation with the applicant, they would look to amend the hours licensed to sell alcohol. So from 1st of November to the 28th/29th of February, the hours would be from 9 AM to 4 PM. And then from the 1st of March to the 31st of October, it will be from 9 AM to 7 PM. With regards to paragraph 6, the proposed conditions, the applicant proposes that the following additional conditions are placed on the licence. Firstly, there will be notices on the grass area denoting the boundary of the licensable area and where alcohol purchased at the kiosk may be consumed. At the kiosk, there will be notices reminding customers that any alcohol purchased at the kiosk must be consumed within the consumption area. All staff who sell alcohol at the kiosk will remind customers purchasing alcohol that they must consume it within the consumption area. It may not be taken outside of this area. Chair, unless I can be of any more assistance, so I'll ask that you commence the hearing in order that members can consider the representations that have been received and to take steps as are necessary and proportionate for the promotion of the licence objectives. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. If there are any questions for the officer, if members would go first on that, then the applicant, and then any of the interested parties. So members, is there anybody who's got a question for the officer? Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The objectives in the report, it says, are on pages 6 to what have you. Is that correct, or are there objectives on page 5?
Sorry, are you objectives or
The objectives
representation
for this? Yes.
The 4 licensing objectives? If it says it's on that. The applicant's proposed conditions regarding the what point is it, please, councillor?
Councillor Chair, and then Councillor Cross, are you seeking clarification of the licensing objectives?
Yes.
Do you want me to set out the licensing objectives?
I was just querying as to which pages they were actually on, as per this report.
Is that significant, or is it the licensing objectives themselves that you require clarifying?
I'm sorry, I was just querying whether the report is accurate or not.
Chair, questions should relate to the application and the substance of the application.
So we will disregard the fact that it might be erroneous. Thank you.
Any other member who would like to ask a question of the officer? Sorry, Councillor Brown. Paul Brown, to be absolutely clear.
Can you be precise as to what we are asked to decide upon? We either accept it as it is, the application is. Presumably, we can exclude from the scope of the license certain licensable activities to which the application relates, or we can reject the whole license application in toto.
That's correct.
Yeah. So we are therefore looking to the ministerial guidance by virtue of section 182 of the 2003 Act as to making our decisions on those heads.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Chair, in order to clarify, I will set out the legal tests and the position at the end of the hearing.
Thank you. Okay. Does the applicant have any questions for the officer?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Any of the interested parties who wish to ask a question of the officer? No, in that case, thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to the applicant to present their case, and again, there will be opportunity. Sorry, thank you very much, Councillor Wally. Yes, the applicant will now present their case, and again, there will be opportunity to ask questions of the applicant and from the licensing officer and the interested parties. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that we or believe that we've addressed the 4 sort of points, if you like, of the Licensing Act and have stipulated how we will address those and how we will manage those 4 points. I think that just for everyone's benefit in the room, it's probably helpful just to explain what we're actually trying to achieve by getting a license on the kiosk. Firstly, I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that we have only asked to license the kiosk for alcohol. We haven't asked to license the kiosk for live music, recorded music, any form of entertainment. And that is really driven by the fact that, one, we're not looking to create an entertainment venue that will create noise or disruption. What we are primarily looking to be able to do is to serve wedding guests who use Normanton Church on a very regular basis, call it a champagne reception or a drinks reception, if you like, as part of the wedding package that they're taking out when they use Normanton Church. And that's a very common thing to happen within wedding venues, and it, you know, Rutland Castle is itself licensed for alcohol sales till 11 o'clock at night, and is essentially a very similar operation to what we are delivering at Normanton. I would also just like to point out that the reason that we have given the area on the plan, so you should all have a plan denoting where we wish to license. The reason that we've marked the plan down to the church and away from the church, again, is to facilitate this, primarily, really to facilitate serving alcohol to wedding guests, so that if they were standing next to the church, next to the walkway to the church, down from the church having their photos, which is often what happens, we'd be able to serve them their Prosecco or their after wedding drinks in that area. So that is predominantly what we're looking to do. We would sell alcohol when the kiosk was open to members of the public if they wanted to buy it, but as the licensing application already suggests, that would be beers and wine, really, no spirits, and all of low strength alcohol. And our internal policy on site that we apply to our other licensed venues is that we will only sell one alcoholic beverage to a customer at a time, because that is what gives us control over making sure that people aren't getting intoxicated or getting disruptive due to the alcohol that we're selling. I guess finally, I would just like to stress and point out that actually our product, if you call it that, at Rutland Water, is a family-friendly, family-orientated destination. We, in a country park, we work extremely hard to maintain it as a pleasant country park environment. We're very proud of the fact that it's a pleasant and, you know, leading country park environment, and we wouldn't be putting ourselves at you know, our business model at jeopardy by creating something that is going to cause disruption to our visitors that are there. And I would also say that actually, by us holding a license, Sally, myself, who are personal license holders, other staff on site who are personal license holders, and the business has quite a lot to lose if we breach our licenses in terms of fines. I mean, heaven forbid, potentially jail time. None of us want to do that. And I think our record of selling alcohol speaks for itself. We do it in our other cafes, which are licensed till midnight, and they're licensed for music and late night entertainment. The committee, I'm sure, is aware. We don't have complaints on that. It doesn't cause problems. There is no public nuisance associated with those operations. So that's really what we are looking to do and looking to achieve here.
Fine, thank you very much. Opportunity for people to ask questions. Members first. Councillor Dale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you may recall, Mr. Chairman, I was on the committee when we drew up the Rutland Water Plan with the District Council. And on that plan, we said that there'd be no commercial development within the boundary of the roads around Rutland Water. There has been some commercial development, and Anglian Water seem to be doing quite a bit of it at the moment, which to me contravenes what we'd said in the early days.
Chair, Chair, if I can just interrupt, any questions must relate.
I'll just come into the question, sorry. The question is, what are the benefits that's coming from this?
With respect, Chairman, that isn't relevant to the licensing conditions. However, the benefits are, it's an enhancement to our customers, who primarily, as I've mentioned, are wedding customers. It's an enhancement to our visitors. A lot of people, general public, like to sit and enjoy a quiet beer or a quiet glass of wine in a country park. People do that having picnics. It's not uncommon. So really, this is given the benefits of it are enhancing, if you like, the visitor offer that we have and allowing people to enjoy a responsible, quiet drink without getting rowdy and disruptive in a beautiful setting.
you said about the providing champagne or whatever for the Normanton Church. How are people going to walk down to the church with the glasses in the hand? Because I understood that the curtilage of the kiosk was where the drinks were going to be.
So that's, if you look at the plan provided, that's why we've asked to put the plan, the licensable area, down to the church, because it would then allow us to serve them either at the church or on the grass
If
area.
they digress from that and go along the pathway, how are you going to monitor it? How are you going to stop them?
So there would be our glasses and assets, if you like, that we would, you know, we would be getting it back. So if you go, you know, like any other wedding, you might have a drink at the bar. You don't then take the glass away with you. Remember, I guess, people coming to the church are only coming for the ceremony. We're not the venue, so they're moving on somewhere else. So they're not taking that stuff with them.
Oh wait, yes.
Same point. We also have a visitor services manager and their team that facilitate all the weddings. So not only would we have people in the kiosk working that can manage that, we also have a team working down there that facilitate the whole of the wedding. It's not actually a wedding reception that they use us for. Not sure if you're aware, but we do the ceremony and they book 2-hour slots. So if they're getting married at 12, they arrive from 11 or from 11:30 and they'll have a 2-hour slot. So to get their photos in, it won't be an afternoon where they're going to be then staying on our premises to drink. They will be leaving to go to their afternoon or evening reception. So they're only on site for 2 hours.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And who's going to run the kiosk daily?
I manage all the catering sites on Rutland. I have Waterside Cafe that's already licensed. I'm the DPS for that, and I have the Harbour Bar Cafe. I have senior managers in place that are all trained. They've all been briefed. They all follow the Challenge 25. We have a Challenge 25 policy. We have a refusal log in place. We didn't refuse anybody any alcohol last year for being disruptive, drunk and disorderly. And so they are all briefed. All the team are briefed and know what to do.
Thank you.
But I am on site 5 days a week, and Will's also a DPS as well. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
Councillor McCartney.
Thanks, Chairman. Just trying to get a bit of a feel for this. So, you've got a 2-hour slot with wedding guests, and they go into the church. They get married. They come out of the church. People are milling around for 3/4 of an hour whilst people have photos or whatever. And they think, "Oh, might it be nice if we have a glass of champagne whilst we're milling around here waiting for photos?" And then after that, off they people to the reception, whatever. So are you going to have waiters or waitresses roaming around serving alcohol, or is it specifically from the bar? And the other thing that was coming up was the fenced off area, and how the signage, you know, how prominent that signage is going to be, because it's not just, like you said, it's not just wedding guests, it's members of the public as well. How prominent that signage is going to be, and whether that's going to start to look a bit unsightly in front of Normanton Church.
Yeah, so to the first point, yes, we would resource that, staff that, like any other wedding reception that you go to would. So it would be our team, Sally's team, who would be serving, clearing up, tidying up afterwards. You know, that's what people expect at a wedding. That's sort of what you've got to deliver. With regards to selling alcohol to general public during the day, yeah, we would put wooden posts effectively rather than a fence. We're not proposing to fence it off, so it would be posts and signage that would say this is the limit of where you can take alcohol if you have just bought it from the kiosk. And that's where, as mentioned by Darren, staff would be saying when they were selling you that drink, please stay within these areas, basically. We will decant the alcohol, we do anyway, so we wouldn't, if you bought a bottle of Peroni or something from one of our cafes now, we wouldn't give you the bottle. We would put it into a cup so that you you have the alcohol in a cup. Same with a glass of wine. We wouldn't, you'd get a glass of wine. So you're not left with the bottle, and that actually stops a lot of people walking off anyway, because it's less convenient in a cup. And again, I draw you back to, we're in control of what we're selling. So I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say somebody won't walk out of the area. Somebody probably will walk out of the area. We will go and say to those people, you can't, but they will have one drink. What they're not going to be walking out of the area with is 10 drinks, because our internal policies say we only sell one drink to a customer at a time anyway. So yes, they might walk out of the area with their one drink. If they were drunk or disruptive, we wouldn't have sold it to them. So yes, we will sign it off. We will tell people not to do it. We will encourage them to stay where they need to stay. But the other controls in there, one alcoholic beverage at a time, decanted into a glass, not selling it to people who are drunk already. That in itself limits any sort of disruption outside of where we're operating.
And you're selling beers, wines, sherries, champagne, any fortified wines, or where are you stopping? What's it?
Okay, so we don't sell any large bottles, so you couldn't come to me and buy a bottle of wine to share. We do I think they're 187ml single serve of white wine, rosé wine. So we then do a Peroni, which I think is a 330ml, and a fruit cider, which is 4.5 ABV anyway. It's a lower, and we also sell a low alcohol and no alcohol Peroni as well. So we're addressing yourself if you were driving, but you still would like to join your party and have a beer, so to speak, but it'll be no alcohol. So with the wedding receptions, they would be the big bottles, but they will be decanted, and we do use the plastic glasses as well. So we don't have any glass on the park, again, just to prevent anything happening. So anything, I don't have any glass on the park. Yeah, everything is decanted into plastic.
And just coming back to me trying to get a feel for what you're trying to create. So we've covered the wedding guests and what you're trying to do there. Other members of the public who are using the park, and one of the persons saying, well, you know what, it's 6:30 on a Friday evening. I just fancy a glass of wine. Are you going to be providing seating there and someone so they can sit down, enjoy the view, and have a glass of wine there as well? Is that the kind of thing that you're
No, it's not. It's the opening hours that we have are, I think they're in your notes, and I think they are from 9 till 4 in the winter. It's all due to the light because we're outside, so it's 9 till 4 in the winter, and the latest it would be is 9 till 7 through the summer, and that's because the park closes at 8:30. So I need to be done, tidy. All my team need to be off site, so we won't be doing anything in the evenings unless we do a carol concert in the winter, and that's we've done those in the past, and that would be down at the church, and that would be mulled wine, a mulled wine and a hot chocolate evening, and it's a nice to have. So so no, there is absolutely no plans to stay open until midnight, and there's absolutely no plans to stay open until closing time of the park. We will be closed an hour and a half earlier than the park actually closes.
Yeah, I'll just add to what Sally said, because the initial application did request a license till 11 o'clock, and that wasn't, again, it's not because we're setting out to create a pub. As Sally's mentioned, we tend to do it at Christmas. We do a charity carol concert in the church each year, and we are doing it again this year for Rutland Choral. And ideally, we wanted to be able to say, if we had something like a carol concert or something in the church, wouldn't it be nice to be able to sell somebody an alcoholic beverage whilst they were watching? Steve Bean classical guitar is another type of event that we've held in the church in the past. However, we accept that there were concerns, and on paper it looks like, why are you trying to stay open until 11 o'clock at night? So we're happy to move those times in, and if we do events like that, we will put forward a separate event license that says we're doing a carol concert and we want to be able to sell alcohol to these people in the church, which is limited to 120 people. So that's, you know, we have no, it's really not a problem to us to bring those hours in.
Sorry, I think you, just to address the seating area, I think we've got 10 benches down outside the kiosk with the parasols on, which say, you know, this is our seating area, you know, and just to reiterate what Will said, it is decanted, it's in one glass. So if they are wandering up to the boundary to sit and have their picnic, they're not, you know, they're not taking, you know, huge amounts of alcohol, because we don't have that policy on our park in any of our Waterside Cafe and the Harbour Bar that are both licensed, and were licensed from when I joined and previously with previous tenants.
Thanks. And one last one before I give other members an opportunity. Why do you want to start at 9 a.m? It seems a trifle early.
Do you know what? It's because it's when we open. Would we sell alcohol from 9 o'clock in the morning? Probably not. I think what we did was copy the times on the other licenses that we've got. So if you look at the Waterside Cafe, it's licensed from 8 a.m. in the morning till 12 o'clock at night. Would we be selling alcohol at 9 o'clock in the morning? No. If that's a concern, we will gladly amend that time. We don't open the kiosk until 11 o'clock in the morning anyway, because there's no custom there for us. And yeah, so we're not going to open it or we might open it for park run, but they want coffee. I think that's the other thing, just to put into context. If you look at the kiosk or go and visit it, it's selling scoop ice cream, coffee currently. Obviously we'd like to sell alcohol, but it sells scoop ice cream, coffee, sandwiches and cake. So it's by no means a pub, and we have no intention to make it as such. And I think, yeah, we've addressed that by saying there's no music or entertainment or anything else on the license application.
Any other questions from a member? Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the explanations. You started off by saying that a single person will come up to the kiosk and purchase one drink, which would be decanted from any bottle or tin and placed in a glass. You then went on to say that you were then going to take large bottles down to a wedding venue at the church and distribute them amongst the guests. Now that is not in accord with what you stated originally, that one person, one drink would appear at the kiosk.
I think, Councillor, I think it's just a misunderstanding of what we were explaining. So if you...
It was no misunderstanding. I was just responding to what you actually informed.
Okay, so then we've just not explained ourselves very well. So if you yourself came up and would like to buy a beer, we would sell you one drink in one glass. If you are a member of a wedding party, then I think what Sally was trying to explain is, yes, we would then have bottles of champagne, and which is why we've got the area that we've got. We might have that serving station set up next to the church. We would still then be pouring the bottles of champagne into glasses and handing them to the guests. But because they would, I mean, they might have got off the Rutland Bell, for example, they might be standing at the jetty there where the Rutland Bell docks. That's where we could be serving them. A lot of wedding guests get onto the Rutland Bell and go backwards and forwards between Whitwell to Normanton, for example, as part of the wedding. So we would still be decanting the alcohol into a glass and giving the customer a glass. What we're not going to do, for absolute clarity, is say, here's a bottle of champagne, pass that around yourselves. We're not going to do that. We just clearly need to take the champagne to where the guests are to then serve it to them.
But each person would then not be paying for each glass of champagne individually.
No, well, the customer would have paid for however many glasses of champagne they wanted for their wedding.
So in fact, what you could be saying is that if somebody wanted to arrange a party down there, you would help to organise any such party with those sort of conditions.
Sorry, can you just clarify the question? I'm not.
If you're going to serve wedding parties, you may also be willing to serve other sorts of parties.
No.
You already stated that you have the choral concert down there.
Yes, and so in that instance, as I then said, we would then do that under a separate event license, which is why we brought the times in from going into the evening. So originally on the application, we said we would like to be licensed to 11 o'clock at night, so that if we had a concert or it's generally music concerts or something in the church, we could then serve to those people that were there. But
and
we now
have you actually had special licenses to serve people attending these weddings in the past?
So yes, wedding guests have done it. The Rutland Bell is the cruise boat that goes across the lake is also licensed. They do champagne receptions. If the customer books it through them, if they're going on the boat, that's a very common thing that happens. We have done it for customers at the cafe at Whitwell, which is when a customer is going, again, it's where they've used the boat to get from
Normanton Church.
No. So that they've had champagne on the Bell at Normanton Church. So they've been on the boat drinking champagne. We've served it to customers at Whitwell where they've got off the boat and walked into our cafe there. We have done, I think we've had a temporary event notice in at Normanton once or twice in the past. There was a music festival there about Ospreys. And I believe that was licensed. So yeah, otherwise we haven't sold alcohol because we haven't got a license.
Up until this particular application, no wedding organizer has asked for you to serve alcohol outside of that church.
They haven't asked for us to serve alcohol because we haven't had a license, but wedding parties have brought in their own Prosecco van or whatever it is, which those organisers have been able to do under temporary event notices and serve champagne outside the church.
Thank you.
So have people been served champagne outside the church? Yes. Have we done it? No.
Thank you.
Opportunity for interested. Sorry.
Chair, you should know I'm always last. Interesting. So the sole purpose is for wedding guests.
No, not the sole purpose, but commercially, for our commercial business game, wedding guests is our primary target market. As I've said, we would then also sell alcohol to passers-by, but we do that already, and it's a nice to have because people like to go and sit in the sunshine in a nice location and have a beer or a glass of wine. You know, that people like to do that. That isn't what we're not on the park. Is a pub. So people buy alcohol from us? Yes, but that's not our primary earner. So at the church, primarily we want to be able to sell it to wedding guests. Would we sell it to other people? Yes, but it's not our main driver at that location.
Okay. Your existing premises have, at least like I know on the south side, you have an outside area where presumably people can drink alcohol in that area. Okay, I just wanted to make sure it's an on-sales area, right? Okay. Around the site, you have signs which say no alcohol. So you've indicated to normal people coming along to Rutland Water, they should not drink alcohol except in your cafes. But you've now just said that you allow people to bring in a Prosecco van to have alcohol. Presumably that's under a TENS notice, a temporary event notice?
It would be, yes.
Right, okay. But that's contrary to your policy, which says no alcohol.
that is, it's a different environment, isn't it? So the signs around the water saying no alcohol are predominantly aimed at us maintaining a family-friendly environment and are a clear indication to people who are coming to use the site essentially to get, to get really drunk in the day. We have had problems in the past, as Councillor Waller put in her objection, of large groups coming out to the site from the inner cities to use it, as a place to get drunk in public. That's what that is managing. However, that alcohol isn't alcohol that's bought from us, and therefore isn't, that isn't specifically relevant to this application. What we are doing though is managing a policy of, if you're coming here with large quantities of alcohol as a member of the public and are causing disruption and everything else, we need to be able to say to those people, that's not acceptable and you can't do it. And operationally on the ground, when you challenge people who are causing bad behaviour, the very first thing they say to us is, well, there's no signs. So largely, that's what those purple barriers are about.
Okay, thank you. Next item is the accuracy of the map that we see on page 27. Is that the correct area that we are licensing this evening?
It is indeed. For further clarification, we have asked for the what three words for the boundaries, the three boundaries. Obviously, one boundary is the water. So when if the license is issued, then we would incorporate the what three words into where the actual boundaries are, the three boundaries.
So the committee doesn't have an accurate map this evening.
You have an accurate map of where the licensable area is, yes.
Okay, so in that case, walking from the jetty to the church, people will have to hand their alcohol back and then get it given back to them because there's about 20 yards that's not in the area.
I believe that the one that the map I've seen does cover the entirety.
Yes, sorry, I'm not actually following the question.
Right, if you look at page 27 of the report.
Yeah, no, I've got the plan here.
When you get to the jetty, you're talking about not the jetty, but the West Champagne walk through. There's an area that's not covered by the licensing area. And I'm just questioning whether this is really an accurate map. Also, not all of the church is covered. The northwestern corner of the church is not covered either. So you're asking us to make a decision on an inaccurate map. I should be using my apologies. And therefore, I also question the extent of it to the east, sorry, to the west. Looking upside down here. Looking to the west, it's a very extensive area that you're looking for alcohol consumption when you're suggesting it's wedding parties of less than 150 people. So that's the number, the maximum number, presumably, that the church can take. But this looks like an area that could take probably a couple of hundred, maybe 300 people. If you look at the area concerned, why are you looking for such a large area to be covered?
So, as I mentioned before, the area that way is to allow flexibility to serve people who are having their photos, etc., taken. So what they will do is walk all the way down towards those trees because they want to have photos with the boat and the church in the background and so on and so forth. That's what that's for.
Right. I'm getting some clarity now. So it's principally for photographing, not for the consumption by the public, non-wedding guests. For wedding guests, for the public who are not wedding guests, presumably you'll want them much closer to the kiosk and not roaming around to the far end of the licensable area. Is that the case?
Would we want them there? Not. They can sit closer to it. They can sit further away. I mean, you might be sat yourself having a picnic at those trees and decide one evening or one afternoon that you would like to get a beer and go and sit at the trees and carry on with your picnic. So that licensable area allows for that.
I'm just trying to work out, you've said it's primarily for wedding guests, but it's a very large area for that, given you're talking about photographs. I just wanted to understand that. Thank you for that. Fees, alcohol, action map. And of course, there'll be no music, and that's no music from anyone, whether it's members of the public or wedding guests, external to the church.
So there's no music is requested on the license application. So recorded music or live music are also licensable activities. And as I've mentioned, we have licenses for those in our cafes already, the fixed buildings, which those licenses run till midnight. We haven't asked for on the application. It wasn't put on the first application. It's not an amendment we've made. We're not asking for music or entertainment licenses in this area. Which would mean if we wanted to do something down there, like a concert, we would have to do that under an event notice, which is a separate application.
Okay, and you wouldn't allow any members of the public to have music in that area either?
No, so I mean, for quite a long time, we've discouraged people from barbecuing along that section of the park. We do allow barbecues on the park. We discourage it and move people on from that section, again, because what we're really protecting is a wedding ceremony, and people getting disrupted by barbecue smoke down there. And if you looked, you mentioned the purple banners, and actually it's in our park bylaws. They're also very clear that we don't want you bringing music into the outside environment, because it's a country park, and it just gets disruptive for people. It's not conducive to the environment that we're trying to create. So we police that as well.
No customary music as well. And then finally, yeah, I'm happy with that.
Thank you. Members, I think I haven't missed anybody this time. Are there any interested parties who would like to ask questions of the applicant? Councillor Waller.
Thank you very much. Your initial planning application to build the kiosk was a replacement of a temporary kiosk on wheels. And the implication was clearly that it was going to replace that, which had nothing to do with the Normanton Church. If your primary, this is the question, if your primary purpose is to provide glasses of Prosecco or wine or what have you for people who are attending weddings, why haven't you simply applied for a license for Normanton Church?
Normanton Church practically isn't an appropriate place for us to be able to serve alcohol out of. This licensing area would cover the church, which is why it does that. So if this was successful, we would be able to provide alcohol service in the church. But because of the way we run the weddings in the church, what we wouldn't be able to do would be to set up there and then clean the place down and sort the church out ready for the next wedding. The application area covers the church, which would allow us to serve alcohol in the church. So we could, if we were successful in this application, do that. But what we also are not going to do, and I feel that we have been open about the fact that we will sell alcohol from that unit to walkers or cyclists or whatever under the controls that we put in place. We don't want to use the church as a shop for selling alcohol.
Okay, supplementary question, if I may, Chairman.
Oh, yeah, missed that, Councillor Wally. Of course, yes.
In which case, and I do understand that it may not be possible to serve alcohol from the church, although you are indicating that you will be providing alcohol next to the church, so there'll be a secondary sales point, albeit ordered in advance. But if your need is for supporting your wedding guests, and I can understand why you would want to help them, why are you putting out lots of picnic tables and all the rest of it all around that new site, which suggests it's somewhere people can go and drink alcohol and have a lovely time, quite irrespective of the wedding guests?
I don't, sorry.
Chair, I was going to say that any questioning should relate to this application and to the licensing objectives, if Mr. Kirstein feels he wants to answer this question.
I was going to say, I don't think that putting benches out is relevant to the application. However, there have long been benches down in that location, and whilst this isn't relevant to the application, I don't see that putting benches for people to sit on in a country park is an unreasonable thing to do. And again, go back to the kiosk, as already mentioned, it also sells ice cream and coffee and is currently operating. And over Easter, there were lots of people sat on the benches having a very nice time.
Thank you. I've got one final question, if I may, and that is, you raised the issue of the weddings tonight, and I hadn't seen it in any of the paperwork, so I apologise if I missed that previously, but it seems to be something significantly different from what I was reading about when I first read the paperwork. Bear in mind, I said that I can understand why you would want to provide for the weddings and so on. But if it is primarily for that, and if the kiosk is, as was previously, ice creams, tea, coffee, etc., why haven't you asked for licensing for the hours when weddings are happening, but you've asked for a more blanket license?
Yes, so we spoke about the early times on the license, and the church's license for weddings every day. We have midweek weddings, winter weddings, Saturday, Sunday, Friday, Thursday weddings all year round. What I will more than gladly put in, we can move the time so that we're not licensed to sell alcohol until 11 o'clock onwards, which is when they start, really. I mean, we're not, as I've already explained, the kiosk isn't open at that time, and we wouldn't open it because there is no trade there for us to open it for.
And as I addressed the councillor earlier, we put till 7 o'clock in the evening because we are very much weather led by the weather, and my cafes do stay open because people like an ice cream, and so we that's why we put that time in for the evening down there. But it's at least an hour and a half before the park closes.
Thank you, Chairman. You have staff on duty when there are weddings, quite clearly, and you've explained that very clearly. You will be selling alcohol, however, if you get the license, at times when there are no weddings. Do you have the same level of staff outside the kiosk to make sure people stay within this non-fenced area and are only buying a drink for themselves and are doing all the things that you say you will ensure will happen when you've got your full complement of staff when weddings are happening?
Yeah, so obviously the kiosk is staffed with staff because it has to be. Are we proposing to put people standing on the grass area? No. Will we police the grass area with staff that are in the kiosk if we need to? Yes. I hopefully you appreciated my honesty when I said, will people occasionally walk out of that area? Yes, they will. But as I've mentioned already, we are decanting alcohol into one glass and selling one glass of alcohol to people who are buying it on an individual basis, if you like. at a time, which when you go back to the licensing objectives of preventing public nuisance and crime and disruption is a very powerful way of doing that. We're in control of the sale. So like any pub, like any late night establishment, you know, we have a legal responsibility to make sure that we're selling it to people who are of the right age and who are not drunk, disorderly, or causing disruption. We're in constant communication with other site staff. So I think the measures that we've put in place are reasonable for the scale or for what we're proposing.
May I, Mr. Chairman, I just have one question really for clarification as to the benches in that area. And correct me if I'm wrong, please. My recollection of the benches in that area is that they are park type benches. Many of them are set on concrete plinths and they carry plaques where they have been donated in memory of loved ones. They are not the cafe type benches that we have in the papers before us. That is my understanding. And perhaps you could just confirm that one way or the other. Thank you.
No, so that's there's mixed benches down there, councillor. So we took the benches from the previous tenant. We took a lot of their picnic benches when the tenant who was there previously left. So there are picnic benches and there are parkland benches.
Any other interested party with a question for the
I had a question actually. I was just wondering about when you were talking about selling alcohol to the public and you give them one drink, quite rightly. Is this one drink in a certain time frame, or can they keep coming up and buying one drink, one glass of wine repeatedly over the time of an afternoon? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's one drink per purchase is the fair way of describing it. So could you sit there, have a glass of wine, come back and buy another glass of wine? Yes. Would we stop selling you wine if we thought that you had too much? Yes. So, but what we're absolutely not going to do, and well, we don't do it now, and it, you know, we already get moans and groans about it, is a couple or a family or something will come up and say, I'm sitting over there with a group, can I have 5 glasses of wine to take back to that group? And then we have to irritate them and say, I'm really sorry, you will have to come back here so that we can give you your glass of wine each. So it's about stopping, I don't know, if you binge drinking, I guess, someone saying, oh yeah, that's for all my friends over there, and then actually it's just for one person with a glass of wine.
And can I just add to Will's, we're very robust policy with the just buying one, but we also have an alcohol refusal log in place. So, and I think I used it once last year throughout the whole of the summer, just for your information, and that was through the Challenge 25, and I didn't have anybody purchasing any alcohol from any of my cafes that are licensed that were intoxicated. Thank you.
Mr. Renner.
Could I just clarify the music side of things? Because obviously you're not applying for a music license, but it sounds as though you're having it. Can you explain what the situation is with that? I assume weddings can have music, but you're not applying for a license.
No, so yes, so we haven't applied for an entertainment license. The church is licensed for weddings, and I think as part of that license, I would have to check the details. So don't quote me on it, but as part of that license, you could have like a classical guitarist or a cello player or something in the church for the wedding. What we couldn't do is get a band and put them in the church and say, we couldn't do what the bandstand in Oakham Cuts Close Park does and get the big brass band down there on a Sunday and say, start playing music, or anyone else for that matter, without putting in a separate license application, and that isn't on this application.
I feel the danger is you'll want to having general license, and then it looks as though you can have up to 500 people there for a music license. That's the danger, isn't it?
Sorry, can I just clarify the license that Will was referring to is not, it's not actually a license, it's a notification of an event, and that is, you're quite right, up to 499 people. That is a specific specific notification that someone is going to be holding an event containing licensable activities, including music, including alcohol, and anything else. They don't have to apply for everything. They can just apply for alcohol or music. So there is on the application, there is no application for music or any other regulated entertainment, including dancing. And if a temporary event notice was served on us, it is also served on the police and the pollution team, the noise pollution team. So if they had any concerns, they would raise it with us, and we'd be back here for another hearing with for that notification. Hopefully that helps with regards to that.
Chair, if I can clarify on that point, this application is for one licensable activity, and that is alcohol. So music isn't relevant to this application.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
But surely there's music potentially happening in the church, which is in the licensable area, and you're not applying for music in the licensable area.
But activities in the church aren't within this licensable activity and aren't within the control of these applicants.
Well, that seems to be strange because it's within the area, isn't it? The church is within the area, therefore I'd have thought it was covered by the conditions of the licence.
No, because it isn't to be part of this application. So any music emanating from the church is the responsibility of the church, which doesn't form part of this requested licensable area.
But it's in the licensing area.
But only for alcohol. So the church hasn't got a music license; it's got a wedding license, and there are conditions on the wedding license of which I can't quite remember what they are. So we still couldn't go and put a band in the church, for example, without doing a temporary event notice.
Again, I'm looking to the legal officer, but I'm concerned that we are drifting away from the focus of what we're here for this evening, which is this very specific alcohol license for this particular area and particular kiosk. And so with respect, both members and interested parties, I'm not going to let you drift off into musical impromptus or anything else. Councillor Cross.
Very kind of you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we have our papers in front of us, and on page 23, it says live music. No license permission is required for a performance of unamplified live music. Now, our legal officer has said that loud music is of no concern to this committee. I beg to differ if we read the papers, or am I misreading what is written before me?
Very possibly, Councillor. I'll bring the legal officer in.
23.
Chair, what the application for on this occasion is for the sale of alcohol.
I understand it is for the sale of alcohol, but does that, or us giving them the right to sell alcohol, then mean that page 23 comes into effect? And if it does not, why do we have page 23 in front of us?
I'm going to turn now to page 23.
You what? We're just double checking.
Perhaps the licensing officer
I do not license weddings. However, I believe that a wedding venue license, which is not under our remit, permits music at a wedding venue for the purpose of the wedding itself. This application is for, as the legal officer said, is for the alcohol. There, under this license, there is no license for live music or recording music, dancing, etc. However, under the wedding venue license, I understand, although I'm not 100%, that music would be allowed under that license for a specific period, I guess.
So therefore, is the information you've just provided, is that relevant to the granting of this license that is primarily for wedding services?
No relevance whatsoever. You asked, or the member, the interested party asked about the music at the wedding, at the venue. I hopefully clarified that it would probably be under the wedding venue license, not the Licensing Act premises license.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Therefore, why do we have this information before us this evening?
What I would guess, Councillor, I was listening to what you were saying. There are a whole number of things which put the context and the background of the whole of the use, shall we say, of the Rutland Water and its surrounds in context. And I think it's important that members had that background. But when we're actually focusing on this particular application, that is precisely that background information not relevant to this application.
Chair, can we just go back and qualify what Councillor Cross's question is? Is your question in relation, Councillor Cross, to the church music, or is it in relation to this part here about recorded music and whether, and there being no permission required for that?
I would very much appreciate a definitive answer to my question, which is based upon the statements made on page 23.
So it no longer falls as a licensable activity. There's been a change, hasn't there, with regard to the playing of music, but the applicants have indicated an intention not to play music.
No, yeah, so Councillor, what you're looking at here is this is just information that is provided from government presumably on licensing. What it's, we haven't paid any attention to this, but this is referring to the 500 piece of it, which is, as Darren said, is where the temporary event notice would come in. So we would still need to put a temporary event notice in. So what in effect it's saying is, if you want to operate under temporary event notices,
well,
this license isn't relevant.
Look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to labour the point. I understand what you've just said, that over 500 people, you would need to get special exemption. However, here it says, provided that the audience does not exceed 500 people. So you can have 499 people down there and have a jolly good rave.
If we put in for a temporary event notice. And I would also, whilst it isn't relevant to this application, Councillor, I would also like to point out that that has, Aaron will tell me how long that has been in for, temporary event notices have been standing for. They're not a new, temporary event notice isn't a new thing.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that is exactly my point. If it is of no concern to this meeting, why do we have the information in front of us to confuse us and possibly to cause me embarrassment?
I'm going to cut this short, Councillor Ross. I would hate to cause you embarrassment. I think you have made your point about the relevance or otherwise of the background paper, but I'd come back to saying what I said a minute or two ago, that we are here to consider this particular application for the sale of alcohol in a very specific spot, and that must be the focus. Now, just looking at the time, we have spent an hour. We are now on part 2, and I'm just going to look to my right in a moment. Each interested party now has the opportunity to make his or her case. That my guidance notes here say the different parties participating in the hearing and members of the committee may ask questions. I'm going to rule, unless I'm ruled out of order, that the interested parties do not ask questions of each other. In other words, you make your point, should the applicant, the licensing officer, or any member of the committee have a question for the person concerned, then there will be that interested party make the statement, pause for questions, if any, move on to the next one. There are 5 people there. at the end of that, there are closing statements. And so each interested party will have the opportunity, if so wish, to make, I hope, a concise summary of what they have said. Equally, the applicant will have the opportunity at that point to make a concluding statement. At that point, I will turn to the legal advisor. This is item 5 and small numerals in your papers. I will turn to the legal officer to make it absolutely clear what we are about to decide. And at that point, I will ask everyone other than the committee to withdraw while we actually come to a decision. That I think is reasonably clear.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. So, Councillor Waller, after all that, as an interested party, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Members of this committee, you are being asked to approve a licensing application for a kiosk at Rutland Water near Normanton Church. First, the site itself is obscured from the road and is therefore ideal for anyone wanting to make mischief. I wonder how the licensee will prevent crime and disorder, therefore, which is a point you must consider. You're told there are patrols of Rutland Water, that there are people on site and so on. But the water is some 25 miles circumference. Will the people who are ensuring safety be there at all times, particularly times other than weddings? Will the staff in the kiosk, I wonder, be trained in dealing with unruly people? Or will they simply, at quieter times of the day, simply be temporary employees such as students? One wonders how the staff working at the kiosk will ensure that those purchasing alcohol actually consume it within the designated area, given that from within the kiosk, it is not possible to see all parts of the designated area. And similarly, how will they ensure that the waste disposal facilities are used? Because from the kiosk, it's impossible to see the full extent. The applicant has already said that they will not have somebody patrolling outside at all times, which is the only way I can imagine that these things will be ensured. Secondly, how will those who sell the alcohol ensure it's not given to children? Again, an employee serving from inside the kiosk will not be able to see what's going on across all parts of the designated area. And therefore, I believe we have potential child safeguarding issue, which again is an issue you need to consider as part of licensing. Thirdly, this is a triple SI site with a private wood immediately behind it. It is not clear how those selling from the kiosk can ensure that customers aren't behaving in an antisocial manner, particularly throwing rubbish into this wood, which is behind the kiosk, so it wouldn't be possible to see it from within the kiosk. And we also are aware, those of us who are involved in this ward, that we have had the odd case in the past of people defecating near one of the car parks when the lavatories were closed, and clearly there are no such facilities at this site. Selling alcohol at this site also raises other safety risks, as the path around Normanton Church is narrow and the water deep. It's not difficult to imagine people getting drunk and disorderly, or indeed drunk and not particularly disorderly, but nevertheless straying away from the uncool picnic benches, walking around the church and falling into the water. And I am not clear from what has been said what the applicant is doing to ensure public safety in this area at times other than when there are weddings. We were made it was very clear about what would happen when there were weddings. And so I would suggest that an open air kiosk next to deep water is not the right venue for a permanent alcohol license, bearing in mind there's no fencing to stop people falling in. I also cannot grasp from what's been said and what's in the papers about what Anglian Water's doing to prevent public nuisance in respect of the neighbours of this kiosk. As I've just mentioned, there's no fenced area within which consumption is allowed. The opening hours, admittedly not as long as originally applied for, are still longer than the previous kiosk was open. And whilst they might be shutting up at 7 o'clock in the evening, a summer evening starts earlier than that, and it's not clear how the neighbours are going to have peaceful use of their garden, which is essentially next door to this kiosk. How much patrolling will there be, and what access will the neighbours have to the senior staff of Anglian Water to call them if they've got a concern, or are they expected simply to call the police each time? I mean, clearly a refreshment kiosk on the banks of Rutland Water is not an unreasonable proposition, but does a refreshment kiosk need to sell alcohol? Rutland Water is used by cyclists, families on a day out, and walkers. Selling alcohol will encourage none of these groups. So who is it designed to attract? This site is away from car parks and is secluded. It would need very specific security to ensure public safety and the prevention of public nuisance. But I've heard none offered tonight, nor in the paperwork, and therefore I would urge you to reject this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Waller. Members of the committee, any questions for Councillor Waller? No? Councillor Gordon Brown.
Clarification, Chairman. Will we have the opportunity of posing questions back to the applicant based on the information that's been presented through the representations?
Well, it would be with the permission of the chair.
Okay.
And because the applicants presented what they have to present, and so if the applicant may have questions for Councillor Waller. But if you're saying that you've got further questions,
well, I think it's points of clarification in relation to the comments that have been made by Councillor Waller.
So you've got further questions for the applicant
because of
with the permission of the chair.
Thank you.
Licensing officer, no. In that case, oh, sorry, I'm the applicant. Have you any questions for Councillor Waller? No. In that case, we move on to Councillor Ball. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And I will be brief, but I think it's incumbent on me to set the scene on behalf of residents and the villagers who are objecting quite understandably to this application. And there are two issues here. The first related to the residents and the villagers. Why? Why are they objecting? Well, it's simply because this application is one step too far. Rutland Water, as we know, is an extremely attractive area. It's highly popular for recreation. We have large crowds in fine weather, etc. And it is understandable commercially why Anglian Water would want to enhance their management and their profits of the water. I have no issue with that. But I think this particular application is in the wrong part. But there are major issues for residents, as in this case, as already said by Councillor Waller, where there are houses close by, not just the church. And there are major issues. And of course, officers and indeed members will be aware of historical complaints within within the water. We have major issues on parking, not only near the church, but on the Normanton Road and indeed other car parks. We have had loud music from equally large family gatherings in the area.
So the representations do need to relate to the license.
Yes, well, I'm just asking, I will just come on to that. 2 seconds. I'm just trying to set the scene as to why. We have had overflying drones, we've had barbecues, smoke, and we've also had entry, and this is important. We have unauthorized entry to the park after hours. So if we look at this license application, there are indeed four conditions. It has to be conducted in such a way that there is a prevention of potential crime. It has to be conducted, the actual area has to be conducted in an area of safety. It has to be conducted where it doesn't cause nuisance. And above all, and very importantly, there is an underage and a child protection, particularly with the sale of alcohol. There has been a reference made to the competent management of the cafe, which has alcohol, etc. But this kiosk is not a cafe. When a license is granted, and I think this will be the general understanding, it's either in a public house, perhaps a large restaurant, or a hotel, and it could have a garden. All those areas, I would suggest to you members, are fairly well contained and can be controlled. And they would obviously have staff who are well versed in the selling of alcohol and would be in control and understanding when someone perhaps has had one glass too many. And I hear about the 1 glass application, but that can be used time and time again. So because we are going on, Mr. Chairman, in summing up really, I think this particular application is in the wrong place. It does not meet the conditions that I've outlined. And I just cannot see how you are going to control a wedding party and members of the public congregating at the same time, because I see nothing in the application of actually separation and control. So I really would urge the panel not to approve this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ball. Again, members of the committee, any questions? Licensing officer, applicant? Thank you very much. In that case, Mrs. Elizabeth Griffin. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. We are the 3rd, 4th and 5th family generation at Normanton, and I fully endorse what has already been said in objection to the granting of a licence to sell alcohol at this temporary kiosk. Licensing the kiosk will inevitably increase the footfall on the grassland site and around the church. This is an ill-advised outcome for the following reasons. There are no on-premises. It is really a takeaway facility with a designated open area of grassland, which is part of a triple SI site. Until about 3 years ago, the sloping area where the kiosk is now sited was grassland with natural drainage allowed by the substrate. A concrete platform and path were constructed to accommodate the kiosk on site. After recent heavy rains, the water was unable to soak away under the concrete footprint and cause flooding on the grass at the base of the path and junction with the main perimeter track. Picnic tables were moved, but the flooded area will be very vulnerable to compaction from trampling, making the recovery of the grass difficult. Conversely, any drought periods we may have could affect grass recovery on footfall compacted ground. This will in turn affect the myriad of organisms living on or under the ground. 2 large parasols have been erected in the picnic area next to the kiosk. We know from experience how unstable parasols can be in the strong winds we get around the reservoir. So when opened, they could be a safety hazard, being so close to the perimeter track. The designated area is split in 2 by the perimeter track and can get very congested, particularly where the path branches off to the church. Some cars use the perimeter track, to cross this area where they are permitted to use a small car park near the gate to grazing land towards the dam. Some cyclists weave around walkers at considerable speed without any warning, which can be quite intimidating and dangerous. With even more people wandering around, this is such an unsuitable and unsafe place to designate for consumption of alcohol sold from the kiosk. Year on year, the Normanton Church area gets busier with visitors, civil partnership weddings at the church, cyclists and the like. The grassland part of the designated area for alcohol consumption would very quickly become far less visually attractive and less inhabitable for living microorganisms that are so vital for the survival of the grassland. The kiosk, being a takeaway facility only, will result in more recycling and more litter. As a society, we should be trying to reduce both, not increase. Yes, larger unsightly bins can be provided and litter can be picked up, but this involves labour, vehicles and expense. There is a licensed waterside cafe at the nearby fishing lodge and Normanton Park Hotel just along towards the dam. Also, the Rutland Bell cruise boat is licensed to sell alcohol on board. It operates between Whitwell Harbour and the jetty by Normanton Church, and the timetable allows visitors to spend an hour or two at either place. I would ask you to please consider my comments so that the Normanton Church area can remain preserved as a rural, sustainable and unspoilt location.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Griffin. Members of the committee, any questions from Mrs. Griffin? Thank you. Licensing officer, applicant. Thank you very much indeed. And then a further Griffin family representation. Thank you.
I think I'm the fourth generation, maybe. So thank you, Chair. So I would like to reiterate and read out for the council the key reasons our family are objecting to granting the alcohol licence to the kiosk. The first reason is on the grounds of resident disturbance, noise, litter, and increased likelihood of antisocial behaviour. We live with a young family in our house, which is situated metres away from the kiosk, which has now been resited very close to our property boundary. It is an isolated rural location, as you well know, and public consuming alcohol sold on licence so close to our family home, we feel is inappropriate. Anglian Water have made no effort, by the way, to consult to us about their plans with the kiosk, and this to us has shown a disregard to their immediate neighbours. The inevitable noise, social disturbance and increased littering issues, which are already pretty bad, we feel causes an unreasonable and has wider concerns around possibly drunkenness and associated antisocial behaviour. This is particularly true later on in the evenings when Anglian Water Rangers are not on duty, or if there are, we've never seen them. The second reason is on the grounds of misleading application premise is an unsecured and unsuitable area. The application is for on-premises license, is not accurate, nor is it appropriate given that this is a takeaway license facility, and there is no indoor premises. The consumption is open grassland, as has been pointed out, and is around particularly a historic building that has no barriers, but there are no barriers to either. So we feel that the idea that just a demarcated area with signs would be insufficient for the public, and the public will be wandering around. But to be fair, Anglian Water have acknowledged this, but it continues for us to be a concern, as our property has been. People, even without alcohol, have been onto our property before. The third reason is on the grounds of wildlife disturbance and the fact that this is a SSSI site. Added noise and disturbance will undoubtedly have adverse and detrimental impact on many ground and tree nesting birds, both in our woodland and in the boundary of which is right next to where the kiosk is. There seems to be a relative disregard by the applicant for the significant impact this would cause to the wildlife in the woodland and on Rutland Water itself. And it has been slightly disappointing to us that this hasn't even been noted. The fourth reason is there is going to be we feel that there is going to be inadequate supervision, particularly later on in the evening. As local residents, we have already suffered from some antisocial behaviour around Normanton Church, particularly during the summer months, often late at night when no rangers are around, and we certainly haven't been able to find any. We feel that if there is an alcohol licence granted to this isolated location, it is likely to make these existing issues worse. We feel that there is a lack of ranger patrols late into the evenings, and we don't know who is going to stop members of the public having consumed alcohol staying around the area and causing disturbance into the night, as this has happened before. The fifth reason is on grounds that better suited and alternative areas and facilities exist. Anglian Water have acknowledged that they have 4 large...
Sorry,
If I may give some advice at this stage, all objections need to relate to the licensing objectives. So any issues with relation to conservation are not relevant. And again, if we're any comments about hours beyond those applied for, but also any other licensable venues or the availability of alternative provisions are not relevant, because commercial concerns such as those aren't relevant here. There would need to be something called a cumulative impact zone, which doesn't exist. And only in those circumstances would members be able to consider whether the granting of one more licence were to be a problem.
But I guess the issue I'm trying to make is the fact that granting a licence will increase the footfall to an area that is already quite isolated. It's getting busier and busier, as being pointed out by other people, and there is an issue around the conservation and the purpose of what Rutland Water does, as well as provide water to people. And so I guess maybe I'm being verbose about it, I won't deny it, but there is an element of the fact that the other facilities that are available are busy, and there's no denying that the Normanton Church area is going to become busier if there is alcohol provided. It gives people another reason to come and enjoy the area and stay, and they do stay.
There would need to be evidence to show that it would be busier and that busyness would be problematic. But again, members need to consider the licensing objectives, which are prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm.
Okay.
Sorry, is that?
No, I have another 2 things to say. One is around health and safety. The consumption area submitted is located right by deep water, which is not guarded or fenced off. We have concerns around what would happen with members of the public who fall into the water or go into on their own accord. It is deep and dangerous around there with heavy weed build-up, particularly in the summer months. And the church is surrounded by loose rocks, which people already frequently clamber over. We have seen people swim in the area in early evenings in the summer. So I'm not talking about things that don't happen. We've seen it happen. And again, there is nobody there to stop that from happening. There's also an issue around cyclists who are drinking, who may be going onto the roads. And there's a whole series of other scenarios which aren't completely impossible to conceive. We would ask also, finally, how the council might consider, how this committee might consider how having alcohol being served around Normanton Church would look and reflect on Rutland as a whole. It is a representative of the county. It is on all the pictures. It is a historic building. It dates back to the 14th century. We don't think that it would look particularly attractive with people wandering around with drinks. Fair enough, possibly with the weddings. There is a reason for that, but selling it to the public in this rural area seems inappropriate. And finally, I'd like to say that we feel that this application is, or we felt that it's a precursor to further development of the site. Although Anglian Water may deny that, we don't feel confident. As it is, they have started out with a temporary kiosk, which has now become a permanent kiosk, and they have never consulted us about this. It is not unreasonable to believe that the alcohol licence could in the future provide a reason for further development. And if there are bigger plans for the site, we feel that it would just lose the rural and quiet and undeveloped charm that it has. Thank you.
Chair, just to clarify, in terms of the last comment about any future intentions, members need to consider this application and can't speculate about what Anglian Water may or may not intend to do subsequently. If they were ever to make a subsequent application, that would at that time have to be considered on its own merits, and any speculation isn't a matter for members today.
Thank you. Any members of the committee with questions? Licensing officer? Applicant? Mr. Renner.
I have concerns on the prevention of climate disorder. Excuse me. There is concern of break-ins to the kiosk to steal the stock. There have been numerous break-ins locally in properties that are actually occupied. This, in the dark in the evenings, will not be at all visible for people. An ideal site. It's not a robust building, so people could well be wanting to get in. As far as the alcohol shall not be removed from the open area of the premises, I think that's a complete joke, really. I can't really see how they can realistically keep it in the defined area. Excuse me a second. If there are people that are drunk and disorderly and they go from have arrived from the car park and then go walking towards the dam, the only way they're going to get back to the car is through the site again. And who's going to be able to enforce it? It's supposed to be an on-site licence, not a general sort of wandering all over the place, I'd have thought. Public safety. The area includes a busy cycling and walking track, reputed to be the most popular circular route in England. It is not acceptable to have the inclusion of this route in the in-licensed area. This conflict of use is a danger to the public. The deep water and the rocky surrounds of the church have already been mentioned. Prevention of public nuisance. The site of St Matthew's Church has become an international symbol of Rutland. It portrays an idyllic, rural, quiet and serene picture. This is what the majority of visitors expect and are entitled to when Anglian Water and Rutland County Council have advertised the site as such. The potential noise and nuisance that could be generated should this application be granted is not particularly helpful. Protection of children. I would not be happy to take my young grandchildren through the in-licensed area that includes the footpath, cycleway and church with the possibility of meeting drunk and disorderly behaviour. Is this the future of Rutland Water? Thank you.
Thank you. Members?
Granted, the application is not granted.
Any questions for Mr. Renner? No? Nothing from the licensing officer? Nothing from that. In that case, we move straight to the closing statements, again in the order in which the interested parties presented, and the applicant will have the final summary of his position.
Councillor Gordon Brown.
Sorry.
Just a couple of clarifications with the applicant, if you don't mind. Toilets. There was no mention of toilets at all. I think that's a relevant point in relation to the license.
No.
No. So you don't need a toilet for a license. That's fine. Thank you. In terms of visibility, are you planning to have CCTV covering the area? You are. That's not mentioned in your application as far as I can see, is it?
I believe
it's in the supplementary document, is it?
Apologies, I forgot to push the speak button. I believe Darren mentioned it in his initial statement. However, if we neglected it, then yes, we are planning to put CCTV in place.
It wasn't on the application. It wasn't in the supplementary. And at the time of the application, when I spoke to Rutland Water, at that time they had no intention of actually putting any within that area. All I can say is the kiosk there was nothing in it. It was like, not being derogative too much, but it was like a big shed with nothing in it. So there was nothing in it to say that they were going to have CCTV. So
they are confirming now that there will be CCTV covering the designated area.
Yeah, covering the area outside the kiosk, the licensed area.
Thank you. Right, Mr. Cross, Councillor Cross, sorry.
Soon to be Mr. Cross. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for reminding me and everybody else. We had a briefing on this, and I raised the matter of the responsibility of the SSSI. And I was informed that clarity for those responsibilities for the custodianship of the SSSI would be made clear if I asked a question of our legal officer.
It's not a matter for this application.
I beg your pardon?
It's not a matter for this application.
Well, in that case, I would ask on the legality of an SSSI being impacted by Rutland County Council granting this licence, which carries the heavier weight, the protection of an SSSI or drink. Thank you. That was a question to our legal officer, and I would like clarification, please.
Councillor Cross, can you clarify specifically in relation to this application? Members are here to make a decision on this application based on the licensing objectives. If ever there is any sort of conflict with any other regime, then that is a matter for the applicants to be aware of. If they have any duties borne in mind by anything else, or if the council does, then that doesn't factor into whether or not this can be granted. For example, if planning permission hadn't been granted for premises where they were needed, it wouldn't be a reason not to grant an alcohol licence, but it might mean that a premises couldn't operate if they subsequently weren't able to secure the relevant planning permission. Regimes are separate. And so the matter for consideration here today is this licensing application, in respect of which the licensing objectives are relevant. And I do feel that you're trying to derail it.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid my point was why at our briefing was I asked to raise the matter at this meeting.
I'm not going to have a discussion about this now, Councillor Cross. We've heard the application.
Well, madam, I am sorry, but I was informed in front of other people that that question would be permitted at this hearing. I do believe that we have a responsibility towards the SSSI, and all I'm asking for is to which legal terms carry the heavier duty. Do we have a duty to our wildlife in Rutland, or do we have a duty to providing more drink? Thank you.
Councillor Cross, in respect of any questions, while we were doing training, what I didn't want to do was answer questions about this application because the training was on licensing generally. So any matter needed to be asked here. And if it was that it couldn't be answered, if you want me to answer a specific point, I will look into that. But in terms of what matter is to be considered here and now, it is this licensing application.
What is upsetting to me, Mr. Chairman, is that I asked the question at the training and I was told that an answer would be given here. Now, unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, I do listen to what our legal officers said and I take them at their word. And I take a pretty dim view when we are advised to ask a question in this session and I am then told that it is not relevant. If I had been told at the time that it would not be relevant,
me give a ruling from
I would have been able to investigate the matter myself. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're of course open to do that, Councillor Cross. I will rule now that unless I'm getting clear indication from the legal officer on my right that the status of the SSSI would be impacted by the granting of this alcohol licence, and I take your point about what takes priority. Unless that is the case, then it's not relevant.
Sorry,
Applicant.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it has nothing to do with licensing objectives, but it's probably prudent to point out that this application lies outside the scope or boundary of the SSI at Rutland Water. So it is not in the SSI area. It's in the recreation amenity areas and the permitted development areas around Rutland Water.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so that end of that one, please. Right, we now come to the closing statements. Again, I would ask you to be concise, and I'll take you in the order they came before. So it's Councillor Waller first.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I made a number of points that I felt there were too many questions unanswered in this application, principally around how the area, the designated area, would be managed to ensure good order, safety, and child protection. There are too many opportunities for each of those areas that are pertinent to licensing to be flouted by irresponsible consumers of the alcohol. And there seems to be insufficient controls. We've had mentioned the fact it's an open area, people can wander off, and that's been acknowledged by the applicant. We have a private house very close by. There's no indication of how their peace and quiet and their ability to enjoy their own property can be sustained. And we've heard from the residents that, in fact, they have had difficulties in the past without alcohol. So we all know the potential effects of alcohol. So I think it's not just a question of NIMBYism, if you like. We're talking about a rural area, a particularly secluded part of Rutland Water, an historic site with the church. And there just aren't enough safeguards in place to ensure that any sale of alcohol here would be done in a way that protected both those who are consuming and those who aren't, indeed, those who are just walking or cycling along the path. And they are issues that need to be taken into account within licensing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Poole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The interested parties have set out a very clear range of concerns and reasons why this application should not be approved. And I would just simply say to the committee in your deliberations, you have 4 objectives to consider. It has to prevent crime, and you look at the building. I would argue it's not robust enough compared with a public house who have cellars to lock away various products. It certainly will not be able to be conducted, in my humble opinion, in a safe manner. It is undoubtedly going to cause a nuisance, and it has to satisfy everyone that underage and young people and children are protected. And I think, unfortunately, on those 4 objectives, it fails everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mrs. Griffin.
I just say I think it has been completely covered by our councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Further Griffin representation?
I don't have anything else to add to what I've already said. Thank you.
Yes, likewise, the councillor, board members have stated the case very well, so we are objecting.
Thank you. Applicant, you have the opportunity to summarise.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think in summary, I would dispute that we're not fulfilling the licensing objectives. I think we have a history of demonstrating that we do fulfil the licensing objectives. I would draw the committee's attention to the fact that no statutory body that's responsible for maintaining law and order, public safety, health and safety has any objections to this application or the controls that we've put in place. We will amend the opening times as discussed. And again, I would also just like to reassure the committee that, again, as licence holders, ultimately we have something to lose if it is later shown that this application is leading to, if we are breaching the conditions of our licence. I don't believe that there is anything legally preventing us from, that should legally prevent us from being granted this licence. That's certainly the position of our organisation, and we would challenge any decision that refused the licence on whatever grounds.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm allowed the legal advisor to summarise, make any statements necessary. I think, again, it would probably be reinforcing what you've been giving us advice for the past couple of hours. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for a licence, an on-premises licence to sell alcohol at the kiosk at Rutland Water. The applicants have said that they are both experienced licence holders, and they have explained how they propose that it will operate, which is predominantly to service weddings. They've said that alcohol provision is already going on in some circumstances, but they want to be able to do that via the kiosk. They've explained that there'll be no glass passed on. It will be a one drink at a time policy. It may be that they acquire some incidental trade, but that isn't their primary audience. They have indicated that they wish to reduce the opening hours to tie in with the opening of the kiosk. They have said that the area will be marked out, and they in order that people don't, generally speaking, drink outside of the licensed area. They've also indicated at the hearing that they will be installing CCTV. We've had a number of interested parties make representations on the basis of the, in some cases, licensing objectives. There are concerns about crime and disorder. There were questions about the security of the alcohol and it being a target for crime. Those questions weren't asked of the applicant, and so therefore it's not known what provisions will be taken or whether or not that's a factor. There's been a lot said about concerns about increased use and noise and disturbance and so on, but that hasn't been substantiated by any of the those making representations. And again, members need to decide on the basis of evidence provided to them. They've been talking about alcohol getting into the hands of cyclists and so on. And there needs to be a distinction drawn between the responsible sale of alcohol and the responsible usage of alcohol. And so any conduct, there was reference to conduct in car parks and so on, that falls outside of this area and outside of the control of any licensees. And again, decisions can't be made based upon speculation. Overall, members have a test to decide today, and where matter has been referred to a hearing because of representations being made, the steps that you need to take as you consider appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives are A, to grant the license subject to conditions mentioned in the schedule, modified to such extent as the authority considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives, and any condition under which are the some mandatory conditions. You can exclude from the scope of the license any of the licensable activities, but that's not relevant here because only one licensable activity is being applied for. So if it were to be excluded, that's effectively a refusal. You can refuse to specify a person in the license as the premises supervisor. No concerns have been raised at all about any of the people running the premises. And then your final option is to reject the application. And again, Chair, any decision made must be based upon the licensing objectives for the promotion of. There are 4 of them, they are equal, and the licensing guidance which has been set out by the licensing officer in his report, to which you must have regard, which means that you must follow it unless you have a good reason not to. And again, in terms of representations, it's those that are relevant to the application that should be considered when you make your decision. And I'd ask that you give reasons for any decision made today.
Thank you very much indeed. Now I'd ask everybody except the 5 officers and members to leave the chamber, please. I'm sure it's perfectly all right if you're in the foyer. No problem there.
Chair, just to clarify, it will only be myself as legal officer and the Democratic Services Officer who will remain here. I will be here to assist with the drafting of reasons, and Dave will be here to provide any support that's needed on the admin front. And it's a decision for members. We are not here to make a decision or to be involved in the decision making.
So the licensing officer can disappear.
I promise I'll come back.
It's been agreed by members, officers, applicants, and the representatives that the decision will be relayed within 5 working days.
At 10 o'clock, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.